listening to Second Cut. This is the weekly podcast from thefilmmagazine.com, where we talk about topics in film theory and criticism. And I'm not about to accidentally say the old intro. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one who is trying to, there we go, get the camera to work.
I'm Sam, and like Del Toro, I too prefer monsters to people.
I'm Kieran. I'm the one that is probably about the same size as Del Toro.
Is he tall? I don't...
Yeah, we'll go with that.
I don't know what that says about either of you.
We'll leave it there.
Perfect. All right. I think we have established I am the shortest one here. So, yeah.
Despite the fact that none of us have met either of us in person. Yes, you're definitely the shortest.
I think we've had this discussion before, and I think we established that I'm the tallest of the three of us.
Yeah.
Which is weird, because I'm the shortest of my group of friends. I've got tall friends.
Yeah. That's what I gathered from... Yeah,
I think I just need to go to somewhere like Japan in order to feel tall at this point.
This week,
look like Godzilla.
This week we did not ask for like information or anything because we don't like using social media. But shout out to our biggest supporters: James, Greg, Liam, Joe, Holly, Sam's mom, whoever else actually listens to us. You're awesome.
Sam's mother's tennis partner and some some guy I bumped into the mess hall called Bernard.
So as you have seen from the title of YouTube or the podcast, we are discussing the Three Amigos, the three major Mexican film directors from, or at least in Hollywood. You know, of course they...
I think it's safe to say the three most successful Mexican directors of all time.
Yeah,
and if not just the 21st century, because unfortunately my knowledge of Mexican film does not go back to the beginning of history, which is obviously something that needs to be addressed, but will probably get addressed in the upcoming 10, 20 years because time.
Yeah, and that's why we kind of decided to do this episode, was to spotlight I guess they do have some Anglo films, but non-American or European filmmakers. Although Mexican culture is very influenced, of course, by Europe, sort of in a similar way to America. But these three, you know, the reason they are the most successful, critically, commercially, is sort of because of their transition into Hollywood. And I wanted to know, you know, do you think that is fair to call them the most successful just because of their success in the Anglo sphere?
I mean, that's unfortunately that is the way of the world. You know, kind of Western leaning. You know, especially like the film industry and stuff. You know, that is how a lot of people kind of measure success. You know, and I mean, obviously it's nothing compared to India and China now, but it's still the US is still one of the biggest film markets out there, and still one of the biggest film industries out there. So.
Yeah. And it's also probably the only criteria I can judge them by, having, as I've said, pretty much no knowledge of the Mexican film industry. It could be that there are some Mexican directors, especially kind of throughout history, that are much more well regarded in Mexico, and in which case, it's probably not fair to say that these are three of the most successful. But in terms of at least our understanding and our kind of, filmic sphere of knowledge. If you said Mexican directors, I'd say Del Toro, I'd say Cuaron, and possibly Inarritu. Is it Inarritu? How do we pronounce his name?
Yeah, Inarritu. That in with the thing over it is Inye. Yeah, Nye.
Yeah, we should probably put as a caveat or a thing to begin with. We apologize for name butchering that will occur throughout this entire podcast. Any titles, any names of places, people, actors, we apologize in advance. We're all Anglo speakers, and therefore that gives us license to butcher names.
I mean, we've all studied film at university. I mean, did any of you cover Mexican films in any of your modules?
No.
The nearest I got was we did Rec, which is obviously Spanish for one of my modules, and that's about it. We touched on German Expressionism. We did French New Wave a little bit, at least odd examples. But I even did a Bollywood film from the 50s or 60s. But in terms of Mexican filmmaking, nope.
Yeah,
sorry.
We covered one Del Toro for me, but that was in a different class, and then international cinema was all European. So maybe it should have been called European.
It was very, very similar to me. I did East Asian cinema, sort of Korean and Japanese stuff, and again, a fair bit of Europe. I think the only Mexican film I studied was in our kind of underground horror module. Like all the different kind of like sub kind of industries around the world, and kind of like smaller film industries. So as we did We Are What We Are, which is an interesting Mexican horror about a cannibal family, which I found quite disturbing at the time. Can't say I loved it, but it was definitely interesting.
Yeah. And I hope your professor was like a real hipster that was like, yeah, I heard of these underground films before everybody else.
Yeah,
watch them in a micro cinema, which is just somebody's attic with about 6 people watching it against just like a bed sheet they've hung up against the far wall.
This was the same guy who introduced me to Bong Joon-ho with Memories of Murder, so I'm eternally grateful to him for that.
Yeah, and I remember from several years ago, Stephen Volk, who wrote Ghostwatch, the BBC kind of pseudo-real documentary.
I saw for the first time this Halloween, and it is amazing.
I still haven't seen it. But it was essentially the TV version of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, where they got about 10,000 comments in and crashed the entire BBC lines, everything like that. He wrote a short story that got published in Black Static, 2018-19, somewhere around there. Essentially, I can't even remember the title. I think it was Unleash the Beast or something like that, about horror filmmaking traditions of werewolves, essentially, like El Chupacabra and Day of the Dead and things like that, throughout the 60s and 70s. And then these group of friends I think they're trying to make their own version of a werewolf movie, and the werewolf obviously comes to life and blah, blah, blah. It's a sort of short story, probably about 8,000, 9,000 words. And I've got to say, I haven't read it in about 4 or 5 years since I picked up that copy. I can't remember any of the names of any of the filmmakers in there or any of the stories or anything, but I know, they have a long history, stuff like that. That's the nearest I've gotten, aside from these guys, to exposure of Mexican filmmaking. So, yeah, it's just something that's overlooked, I'm afraid.
I mean, this month I've seen, on Mubi, I watched The Skeleton of Miss Morales, which is meant to be one of the kind of Mexican films, of the kind of mid 20th century. I think it's from 1960. A really kind of pitch black kind of macabre kind of comedy, about a taxidermist, who doesn't get on with his wife and basically ends up killing her and displaying a skeleton, and basically just tries to prove that he can still get off. He can be proven innocent, in court of law, and basically he can. So it's that was an interesting one. And I know there's a fair few trashier, schlockier, kind of low budget kind of horror films and genre films, that it's become known for. I mean, a lot of people, when they think of Mexican cinema, they think of just shoving a wrestler in any genre picture, it's like the luchador kind of subgenre, again, the other month I think I watched they call it the Batwoman, and basically, she's almost wearing almost like a DC Batwoman kind of outfit, except it's a bikini, and she's like a secret agent and just beating up bad guys on boats and things.
Okay, this I need to see.
Yeah.
Let's give a shout out to Greg, who is watching right now. Greg, if you have a favorite movie from Guillermo del Toro, Alejandro González Inarritu, or Alfonso Cuaron, let us know.
I happen to know Greg is a massive Del Toro fan, and without reading what I say, I'm guessing he's going to say Hellboy.
I'm sure we're going to get to Hellboy. Sam, isn't that one of your favorites from him?
Okay. Let's get started the way right now. Hellboy 2 is my favorite film of all time. So yeah, I think you could say it's that. Yeah, and weirdly, it's not. I mean, obviously, I love Del Toro. The look of Del Toro's films and the kind of the the intricate design work and all the prosthetics and animatronics and everything. I love all that. I love like how fascinating he is with monsters and creatures. I just love the feel of kind of everything he does, creating these like wonderful, like fantastical worlds. But weirdly, the thing that really stays with me about Hellboy 2 is almost like it's almost like a goofy kind of rom-com kind of element. Really, it's like full of these like weird creatures kind of falling in love and having friendships and falling out of each other. And it's all about. He's a big old softy, as Guillermo. I think he's quite romantic, really. As disturbing as some of the imagery is, and as brutal as sometimes as the violence is in his films, it's just it's all. I think it's all in service of people, outcasts, just wanting to be loved, basically. That's thesis.
Yeah, that's his general idea that kind of essentially monsters are not the monsters. And I think that started from childhood. I can't remember if he had kind of I think maybe he had kind of nightmares as a child and something like that. Yeah. And these monsters became almost imaginary friends to him, and so he had a lifelong attachment to them throughout. And just on Del Toro, just getting it out of the way very quickly, I am still waiting for somebody to greenlight his adaptation of Mountains of Madness, the Lovecraft adaptation.
Yeah.
We've
got Frankenstein next, though. That's
the thing is, they were almost going to over a decade ago. And they'd started working in. I think Tom Cruise was going to be in it, so it was going to be major like stuff. And then Prometheus came out.
Yeah.
And they were like, there's actually quite a lot of similarities. So I can't remember who was doing it, but shelved it. And so we're now waiting for it.
I've just remembered something I need to demonstrate here. I have this.
I have.
Okay. Beautiful.
I've Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Obviously, this predates the Netflix anthology series, but
which is great.
This is what my parents gave to me kind of when I completed my masters, I think, and it's just full of all these, just behind the scenes photos and all like his designs and prosthetics work and all, and it's just a big scrapbook, but it's such a beautiful thing. And that's just why I love him so much. He just puts so much like passion into everything, and he starts out with like in makeup, and prosthetics and stuff. That's how he got into the industry. Like just as one of the guys in the trailers, just making up the actors, for the scenes, and then he sort of works his way from there.
Well, but before we get into Cuaron and Del Toro, which I think is the one we all kind of know something about a bit more, I want to get the most artsy of the three out of the way. Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu, who I'm just going to call Inarritu from now on, but I did read an article from him, or not from him, about him from this. There was a whole Spanish language, or it was something like Spanish language cinema, a journal. They had a whole issue dedicated to him. So I found a lot of good articles. And one thing they talked about was like the way everybody refers to him, because the way, names work in Mexico, you have your mother's maiden name, and that's like a last name in a sense, and then you have your father's last name, that's your, surname. And so he now goes by Alejandro G. Inarritu in credits. But yeah, I want to start the discussion of him with a scene from... Oh, hang on. Greg says, I will have to have a look at that, Sam, when we meet next. So there you go.
Yeah, sorry, Greg. I can't believe I've never shown you that before.
Scan copies and send it to him.
Yeah.
There's a scene in his latest movie, Bardo. I think it's called, Bardo, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths. And it's semi-autobiographical. There's a scene in it where there's his son, the protagonist's son. I can't remember. I think it's Silverio is the character's name, and his son is talking to him about how he dragged their family to America, and he's always romanticizing Mexico, but there's all of these problems in Mexico. There's wealth inequality and the cartels and stuff like that. He's saying it in English while Silverio's speaking in Spanish to kind of show that divide. And the whole film is kind of about he's going to accept this award in Los Angeles to help American journalists feel more, open and accepting. It's a very, cynical move on their part. And so that's sort of what the film is about, is his struggling with his identity, the way he's built a sort of legacy in the American sphere. And the character, by the way, he's a filmmaker and journalist, if I didn't say that. So his sort of multidisciplinary background also relates to Inarritu. So all that to say, what Inarritu, I think, is trying to explore through his films is, dealing with artistry and Mexican identity. And that really shows through in one of his latest pieces. He did a VR setup, and it showed like an immersive immigrant experience. So you could walk through like, what's it like to be a Mexican immigrant, which was really interesting. Or probably even just Latin Americans. It's all kinds of people come north through Mexico into the U.S. So he was born in the 60s, and he actually started out as a radio host, which is promising. I could still become an Oscar-winning director. He really liked music. He played a lot of music. He scored a few films, and eventually he went into advertising. And he had a production company where he would make commercials, and he wrote a treatment for a TV show. And he ended up wanting to make movies, and so he did. And he teamed up with, why do I not remember the writer's name? Guillermo Arriaga. And Guillermo Arriaga, you can't tell the story of Inarritu without him. And this is one of the papers I read. It's about the auteur nature of Inarritu's work, because he was working so closely with Arriaga, and both of them took credit for the work that was happening on the three films they made together, Amores Perros, 21 Grams, and Babel. And one of them is in English, 21 Grams. Amores Perros is in Spanish. One of his only 3 Spanish films. And Babel was his big breakout, where he got a Best Picture nomination. And the reason, and I'm sure we'll get into that 2007 year was a big deal, is because these guys were nominated for films not in the foreign film category, which we've had our discussions on that, of course, if we want to rehash that.
I will keep my mouth shut. Otherwise, this episode may be sort of 2 hours long.
So the authorship for those 3 films, it's complicated, but ultimately Arriaga was kind of kicked out during Babel. He was not allowed to come to Cannes for the premiere because he had been a jerk. He was taking credit, whereas Inarritu was a bit more PR focused, talking about the team. They released an open letter that basically said, you suck, Arriaga. You don't care about giving anyone credit but yourself. And so that their relationship could sort of be a modern example of Truffaut's hey, check out that water bottle there. You could get it at our Redbubble store.
I know, right?
The debate between the writer, the screenwriter, and the director, which one gets credit for authorship? And I mean, the simple answer is both in a sense, but
I was going to say, it's not like we've had any legal battles raging since for very prominent kind of franchise rights in any way, is it, Sean? The Friday the 13th. Carry on.
So then after Babel, which it had Brad Pitt, Kate Blanchett, it blended a bunch of different countries and cultures and languages, taking place in like Morocco, Japan, the U.S. border. It's a really interesting story, and he made Beautiful after that. I didn't see that. That has Javier Bardem. And then after, the films everybody knows it for, Birdman and The Revenant. Guys, what do you think of Birdman and The Revenant?
I really like I really like the Birdman. I really like
Harvey
Birdman. I really like Birdman. I mean, and it's funny. It's become almost fashionable to hate on it. Really, it's kind of people saying, "Oh, it's too pretentious. It's too long. I didn't really understand it. It wasn't that good." But no, it's a really interesting film, and yeah, I have a lot of time for it. The Revenant, less keen on. I kind of got what he was kind of going for, and kind of it's very visceral, and kind of you feel like being on the journey, but the more fantastical elements in it, it's at one point it seems like he's DiCaprio's character's having a bit of some kind of a religious out of body kind of experience, and I've kind of thought it was a little bit. Some of the representations of like native cultures seemed a little bit patronizing to me, but or stereotypical maybe. Maybe that's just the way I read it. I don't know, but yeah, it was very. Very full on, I get why people had strong reactions to it. But it was one of those where I kind of thought, did you really need to actually take your cast and crew out into the wilderness, sub-zero temperatures, did that make them film better, really?
That's part of the art, Sam.
Same discussion we had the other week with Heaven's Gate. It's just at one point you just need to look, just chill out, dude. Just ask your actors to act.
Kieran, what do you think of the one of those that you've seen?
I was going to say, I have seen only one movie by him, which is Birdman, and it has to be said, I have not seen it all that long ago, probably about 2 years ago, maybe last year. I decided I should probably actually see this. I actually really liked it. I kind of didn't think, I thought it would be one of those ones where I'm just like, okay, yeah, fair enough, sort of meh. Because that seemed to be the reaction it's got. It's very well guarded, but it's one of those movies that you kind of only remember when somebody prompts you about it. Again, like so many others, where you go, oh yeah, it's a great movie, but nobody's putting it in their top 10s kind of thing. Maybe top 10 of the last 10 years, perhaps, of all time. Nobody's putting Birdman. But it is a very good film. Everyone does well. It's a nice take on superhero movies in that it kind of is but isn't at the same time, which is, and I don't think you could have made that movie 10 years beforehand. I think that the movie can only be made because Marvel is going and DC is now, and even it's Michael Keaton's in it, who obviously Batman, and they make fun of that all the time. And apparently, when he got sent the script, one of his first questions was, "Are you trying to make fun of me?" And he was just like, "No, that's not the idea." But even after Batman, if you'd have made this in sort of, I don't know, 97, somewhere around there, when Batman and Superman have been going. It just wouldn't have pulled off, because a lot of it is about the identity, and a lot of it is about the kind of superhero alter ego, which, the previous 10 years of Marvel really kicking in, and then DC and Dark Knight and Batman, that kind of solidifies the superhero zeitgeist, which part of this is deliberately upending, as well as, and the kind of pressures of acting and all that kind of stuff in it. So I think it is very much of its time from that respect. I don't think even now you could make it, because kind of it's like, another film trying to do something different with superheroes. Like we've had that cycle. This was just one to take the idea and apply it to something else. It is a film that has a superhero in it rather than a film about superheroes, which is the angle that I particularly enjoy. But it's really nicely done. The one shot kind of idea, apparently, like throughout the time, everyone said this isn't going to work. You're ridiculous. Like, all his writing partners were going, "This isn't going to work. It's suicidal. You're an idiot." Apparently, like, some of the producers at the top were like, "You're an idiot. This is suicidal. It isn't going to work." Like, nobody thought it was a good idea. And to a certain point, when somebody goes, "Oh yeah, we've made a movie with Ed Norton and Mike Keaton and Emma Stone, and it's done in one shot, or made to look like one shot," everyone goes, "We tried that before. Most of the time, it doesn't work. Sometimes it does, but most of the time, it's a gimmick." And it could have been a gimmick. And that's always the rub when you try and do something like this. Yes, we know we've had The Ark, I think it is, the Russian film. Yes, we had Rope that tried it. But a lot of times it is a gimmick. And even when Hitchcock did Rope, his entire thing literally was, "I want to see if I can do it." That was the idea of Rope. Just like, let's see if we can do it. It was essentially one shot. There's no kind of reasoning behind it other than just a technical challenge. So this could have been a gimmick, but thankfully it does transcend that. It's not the absolute masterpiece, but it's still a very, very good film. And eventually I will get around to The Revenant, which as far as I can work out, was literally made to try and get Leo the Oscar finally. And I mean, I haven't seen it, I can't tell, but obviously Inarritu is somebody I need to go properly into.
I mean, here's the debate. It's like, did Leo actually win the Oscar for The Revenant, or was it a very belated Oscar for Wolf of Wall Street?
Lifetime achievement.
Yeah.
Well, and
probably lifetime achievement award. Let's be fair.
And yeah, the superhero stuff in Birdman is very relevant to modern film. And I had never heard of him until that movie. That was the one where I was like, "Oh, who's this guy?" And I watched it and loved it then. I actually would have put it on my top 10 if I had remembered it. But
that's exactly my point.
Yeah.
You've just proven it.
Yep. But yeah, no, I really enjoy. What's weird is we had so much time and I didn't think of it. But yeah, I think the other important part of Birdman is the wanting to be perceived as an artist aspect of it. And who knows how much of that is a commentary on himself or on his friends who got a bit more into franchise film than him. But that's the thing that I think is so interesting about Inarritu, is that he hasn't really broken into the mainstream. He was the president at Cannes, but he's never made a franchise movie. He's never made a movie with a sequel.
Here's one for you. What would an Inarritu franchise movie look like, and what would it be? What property would it be, and what would it look like?
I don't know.
As a sequel rather than like starting one off kind of thing, Because I mean, even like Del Toro, you can't say, "Oh, it's franchise," because he did Pacific Rim. Well, he started that, so that one doesn't count. You know what I mean? So, what would what movie? Essentially, what movie would you hire Inarritu to do a sequel to?
No, I have no idea.
Tintin. One shot Tintin. It'd be really existential.
Or like a sequel to something like Last Night in Soho or something like that. Something that's already got like or her doing the first one, but it's not like massive franchise. I don't think you couldn't see Inarritu doing a DC Comics movie. Like, just not going to work. You already did that with Birdman. Well, it's just not going to happen.
I think that's because his commercial work is commercials. Like, he knows how to do, catchy, get people to watch this, get a lot of eyes on it. Like, that's a thing that he did in his career. But like with his films, he obviously wants to be more of the auteur artist way to look at it. And that is something that he has thought about in his career within those debates with Arriaga. But while Birdman and The Revenant are definitely the two he is best known for, his best movie is Babel. Like, it's so, like, it's ambiguous, which is just awesome. There are some answers to what happens to characters, but most of it really is just left up to the imagination of the viewer, and it's so bleak. The way that the story intersects, despite being a global film, showing the way one little action can affect everybody. And 21 Grams and Amores Perros have the same sort of interconnected network of characters told in a non-linear fashion. And those three films, those are the ones with the debated, who's the one who made it, who's the one. But he obviously had a huge influence visually in the editing room. He was an editor, I think along with someone else for Amores Perros. And the same thing on Bardo. He was the one who helped edit with the editor who is credited and was also the composer of that film. So, I think that one being very personal for him in a lot of ways sort of makes it maybe his greatest. I'm also a sucker for surreal films, but it wasn't the best received of all of his work. And then another important aspect of his filmmaking is the way he incorporates other Latin American, people behind the camera. Obviously, he worked with Lubezki for The Revenant and I think for Birdman, but I may be wrong. One of the not only greatest Mexican cinematographers, but one of the greatest cinematographers of all time, or at least working right now. I mean, that visual style that he brings to The Revenant gives just epic scale. And then that is kind of copied over into Bardo, too, in a much more intimate setting somehow, even though he didn't shoot that one. So either Inarritu learned something for him, or they just work. I would guess so, because his work, Lubezki's work with Malick, looks really similar. So, I think he's a really interesting guy, and it's a shame that I somehow didn't hear about Bardo until just now. I guess that it wasn't well received enough to get lots of buzz. I think it did have best cinematography at the Oscars. It didn't win it, but
I think it possibly was done disservice coming out so close to the Fabelmans. Really, director looking back, doing a sort of semi-fictionalized version of their own life. And obviously, I think you're not going up against Spielberg. You're always going to look kind of small and insignificant next to Mike.
I don't know. It was a little bit before that, but you also had Belfast as well with Branagh.
Yeah. Yeah.
So quite a few films of these kind of big names, kind of looking back on their life,
and even Pain and Glory with Almodovar, a couple of years before. So I think so very stylistically distinctive directors having a moment the past few years, and very introspective.
So it's obviously only a matter of time until Cuaron decides to do one.
Yeah. Roma incorporates elements of his early life, so maybe he already has.
Yeah, and like Roma, this was also released on Netflix, so I guess they're all kind of getting in with that.
Yeah. I mean, they've all made that transition. I mean, Del Toro, Pinocchio was on Netflix as well, wasn't it? So,
and obviously Cabinet of Curiosities.
Yeah.
As well. Where's Frankenstein coming out? I hope that's going to be a big screen.
I think Netflix are funding it, but it will probably have a limited release. Probably
limited release. It better do. Let's be fair. Better damn.
I mean, we've been waiting 30 years for his take on Frankenstein. It's like it's got to be worth the wait, and you got to be able to see it on the biggest screen possible.
Because is that Universal? Is that them trying to reboot their Dark Universe, or is this completely different?
It's completely different.
The darker universe.
I'm sure there will be plenty of Universal Monsters influence in there, because
they probably also wouldn't. They wouldn't let Netflix fund it, I'm sure.
No.
And his totals for awards, he's been, just at the Academy Awards, 34 nominations, 8 wins, and he got back-to-back Best Director, maybe? I can't remember. I think just Best Director for Birdman and The Revenant. So he was the first Mexican
Birdman got
filmmaker to do that.
Birdman got Best Picture as well, didn't it? But The Revenant didn't.
Yes.
I don't think. I seem to remember. I actually had the stats up earlier on, so, in terms of how prolific and successful they all are. So, Del Toro, 12 films since starting, in features in 93, with Oscars for Pan's Labyrinth, Shape of Water, and Pinocchio. Then you got Cuaron, 8 films since 1991, and Oscars for Gravity and Roma. And then Alejandro Inarritu, 8 films, but that's since 2000, so he's outpacing Cuaron, and Oscars for Babel, Birdman, and The Revenant. So it's they're all up there, aren't they?
And also for his VR Flesh and Sand experience.
Yeah. When I saw it, I didn't really know what I saw. I didn't really know what it was. So do I include it in my stats or not? Yeah,
I wish I could have watched it. I don't have a VR headset. I'm sure there's some kind of you can watch it way, but I think where I'll leave it off with him is if you're going to watch any of his films. Outside of the 2 big ones, I'd go with 21 Grams because it's in English. It has Benicio del Toro, Naomi Watts, and Sean Penn, and their interconnected, non-linear story. It's just so awesome. The way that they wrote and edited it all together. It's
We'll
great.
edit that out.
I won't, sadly. So that is him. Maybe he'll come up a little more or less, but obviously the other 2 have some more popular films, we'll say, than him. And real quick from Greg, his favorite Cuaron is Prisoner of Azkaban, Del Toro, Hellboy 2, Inarritu, The Revenant, and he has unfortunately never seen Birdman. So, Greg, hang up this call. Stop watching us. Go watch Birdman.
Yeah.
Don't. You're the only one.
Next time you got 2.5 hours to fill.
Yeah.
This is also completely uncut, one shot, so we are also impressive.
Yeah, and speaking of long single takes, let's quickly switch over because time is running away from us and we don't have ad breaks or anything and people will get bored. So speaking of long takes, I'm just going to segue into very quickly Children of Men. Almost purely for the car attack, which is one of the greatest long takes ever shot. And it's just, I think it's one of those ones that you watch it the first time and you don't appreciate how good it is.
It sneaks up on you, doesn't it? By the time you realise what's going on and what he's doing, you're well in it, aren't you? And you just
and it reminds me very much of what they do later with It Follows, with some of those things where you just mount it on a camera and just pan 360. It feels like a very similar shot to that, but mounting in a car with the attack is great. Anyway. Where do we start with Cuaron?
Well, while we're on Cuaron, my first question is: so I've seen Prisoner of Azkaban, probably many more than several. Yeah. I've seen it a lot. People always say it's the best one, and Alfonso Cuaron did it. I've never watched it and been like, wow, this is an amazing Harry Potter. It pretty much seems the same as them to all of me. So can you guys explain to me what makes Prisoner of Azkaban stand out from the other Harry Potter films?
Well, us being Brits, apparently we have better insight.
No, you like more of Cuaron's films have seen. Sorry, not like. You've seen more of his films than me.
I've seen 3.
I'll leave this one to Kieran.
I've seen 3. With Potter, and one. Let's quickly put it out. We are not endorsing J.K. Rowling or anything like that. We're judging the merits of the film.
That's why I prefer just to sit this out completely. So.
Well, she didn't direct the movies.
Thanks for that.
Separate the film art from the book art.
Yeah, but apparently but now at this point in time, anytime you talk about Harry Potter, somebody's going to get up and up. Stop supporting J.K. Rowling.
No. To be honest, I accept the books and the films give me a lot of happiness in childhood, but I'm done. I'm done with that part of my life now. I prefer just to shut it all away in a little box and not.
I've realized they're children's books.
I physically probably wouldn't be the person I am without Potter because they got me into reading books and novels from kind of children's books when I was like 5 or 6. That was the series that started me off and then got me into it, and I'm now doing a PhD in creative writing, so I could not be here without Potter.
Prisoner of Azkaban. What's different about it? Why is it?
There is a lot of it is Cuaron essentially turned up and completely. A lot of it redid the entire thing. The visuals are different, the designs are different, the tone is different, the color palette is different. I think he went to John Williams and essentially keep Hedwig's theme and scrap a lot of the rest of the themes and stuff, and kind of almost redo it from ground zero.
And by the way, is this from Chamber of Secrets, or had there been pre-production done and then he came in and changed all of that?
I think from what I remember, many years ago, I did go around the Warner Brothers making Harry Potter down in London. Yeah. But this is like 9-10 years ago, so I can't tell you for definite. I think it was kind of when he was brought on board, he decided to go in a new direction. So the design of the Hogwarts castle is different than the lot.
Yeah, didn't it take them a long time to find a replacement for Chris Columbus? Basically, like a load of people were in contention, and a lot of people got into like early kind of work in it. I mean, I think at one point, I think Del Toro might have been on the list. I think.
Do you know who else was in talks to do it? M. Night Shyamalan.
David Lynch.
Okay, that would have been interesting.
Because Rupert Grint, when he did Knock at the Cabin early in the year, was saying, I met Shyamalan before when he was in the runnings to do Prisoner of Azkaban. That would have been a movie.
Del Toro was approached to direct, by the way.
Yeah. I thought
apparently, J.K. Rowling kind of liked him from previous works, and that's one of the reasons he was brought on board, that Rowling knew him from previous films.
From what I remember, I do think he was less bothered about sticking kind of to the letter of the book. He was both guys saying, look, making it a bit looser and saying, look, this feels more natural if we do it this way. Yeah, it's not strictly speaking what's on the page, but you get the gist. This gets the point across. I think possibly gave the cast a bit more room to breathe as well. They all come across as kind of more naturalistic and believable, not as mannered.
Yeah, and I mean, there's even stuff about, he made them all essentially put their own ties on. So in the first two, Chris Columbus, all the time, it's very neat and proper, whereas half the time, essentially just went, dress yourselves. So, it's a slightly scruffier, and it, again, as you're saying, it feels a little bit looser, but the Hogwarts castle was a different design. Everything was just redone design-wise and visually to fit Cuaron's kind of style.
Yeah, I mean, for me, of the three of them, he's the one I agree with his perspective on kind of how to direct and work with his actors the most. I think Inarritu can maybe go a bit kind of mad otter, off the deep end, kind of, just suffering for the art and everything like that, where it's not always for me necessary. I think Cuaron's very kind of collaborative and gradually build up the characters over time, and kind of he's open to ideas and open to improvisation, then bringing their own thing. It's
there's obviously the famous story about him setting the three main cast of Potter of Azkaban homework, which was to go away and write an essay, as it were, on their characters. And Emma Watson turned in like a sort of 7-8 pages, very nice and neat, detailed. Daniel Radcliffe did about a page and a half, and Rupert Grint said, I'm not going to do it because I don't think Ron would actually turn in the homework. Which is the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's just like, my character wouldn't do it. I'm meant to be in character. I'm not going to do it. See ya. It's the greatest kind of, if you want to see how the three represent their own characters, it's brilliant.
So how did those skills translate into Y Tu Mamá También, Children of Men, Gravity? How do we see that stuff come through?
So, I mean, Cuarón did a low budget Mexican film to start with, and I've forgotten the name of it now. The one from 1991.
Solo con tu pareja.
Thank you.
We begin to butcher names.
Yes, yeah, and then he did a version of Great Expectations, I think, straight after that, which
he did a film called A Little Princess as well.
Yes, that was it. Yes, but Y Tu Mamá También was the one to kind of really break him through, kind of internationally. Essentially, I think it was him kind of. I rewatched it this week, and so it's known for its like explicit kind of and frank depictions of sex, relationships and drug taking. Basically, like you're young, you think you're invincible, you're gonna shag everything that moves and take whatever you like and just go on a trip. Basically, it's a road movie. It's like it's using a very kind of American genre, but put like a Mexican kind of spin on it. It's essentially it's a long trip to the beach is what the film is. It's and he's he uses a I mean, I must admit, I wasn't aware of this. So the 3 stars of the film are so we've got Diego Luna, who's best known now as Cassian Andor in the Star Wars universe, but at the time he was quite well known as a telenovela star, basically a soap opera star, and for a while Cuaron wasn't sure about actually using him in the film because he thought, oh, my Mexican audience, they'll have this preconceived notion about him. There's been this like squeaky clean kind of boy next door kind of character, and I want him to be a bit more edgy. But it was his co-star Gal Garcia Bernal who already knew Luna and got on well with him. Said, "Oh, no, please cast him. We'd have really good chemistry. I think we'd make this our kind of characters, our best friend characters, a lot more believable if you cast him." So and he relented to that. And the other star, traveling with these 2 kind of teenagers is Maribel Verdú, who's a Spanish actress who's worked with Del Toro a couple of times. She's in Pan's Labyrinth, and I think she's is she in Devil's Backbone as well? I can't remember, but she's definitely in Pan's Labyrinth. So this kind of brought kind of a bit more international attention. I mean, it was popular in Mexico, but big hit internationally as well. And was nominated for Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars that year, as well as Best Foreign Language Film. And again, on obviously this span off after this. Obviously, he got the Potter gig, and then went on to do Children of Men and Gravity. I think his films are kind of, with the kind of genre films and whatever the budget they are, I think he does kind of strive this kind of naturalism. Generally, I don't think they're not, apart from like the one long take, in Children of Men. I don't think they're generally stylistically flashy. They're not like ooh look at me. They're kind
although thinking about it, Gravity is just a series of like 10-minute takes.
Yeah, but even the way he did that, it was quite a low budget version. I mean, it's meant to look even more kind of dialed back. Originally, they're testing it against like black fabric, basically. I'm thinking like, do we even need like a CG Starfield on this? Could we just do it like really low budget like this? But in the end,
strap them to a big robot and just swing them around and see what happens.
I mean, they developed technology, they developed like special lighting rigs and new cameras and these rigs just to. Because basically they realise all they're going to have throughout the film is the actors' faces. Everything else is going to be an effect center. Essentially, it's an animated film with actors' faces grafted onto it.
It looks glorious.
It does look glorious, yeah. And obviously, 10 years on, I think it's still just as punchy as it ever was. I mean, that is the best thing I've ever seen in 3D. I mean, I'm not a fan of the kind of the format really, but that really justified it for me. Gravity was amazing.
There are some films that you kind of need a smaller screen for because they're more intimate. That is one that you need on the biggest screen possible, the biggest sound system you can get. If it's a choice of watching it at your house on a laptop or a mate's house that's got a 30-40 inch TV, then you go to the mate's house and you put it in the DVD player, because even just that is going to just make a difference. It is pure kind of spectacle. And it's glorious.
Yeah. I mean, on back for Itamam Tambien, I think Cuaron was very aware that he was kind of straddling these two worlds at that point. He was making that leap from his country of his birth, and the art there, to more Hollywood kind of stuff. And he talked about why he needs to make Itamam Tambien, and he said, I wanted to make the film I was going to make before I went to film school, a film in Spanish, a road movie involving a journey to the beach. So it's like, I think he was looking back but looking forward as well. I think he kind of knew this was like the turning point. Things weren't going to be the same after this. When he was given like higher budgets and kind of more creative freedom, so to speak. I mean, he's had a few like creative partnerships of this. I mean, he works with his family quite a lot. You know, he's co-written screenplays, you know, with his brother and with his son. I mean, I think Gravity was co-written with his son, I seem to remember. And that was at the time that was written when he was at a particularly dark place in his life. You know, I think he suffered from depression, and he wasn't really sure where he was going, kind of as an artist, and he needed this outlet. You know, I think a couple of projects are stalled, and he wasn't really sure kind of where he was going, but then they just knocked together the screenplay quite quickly, and it ends up taking them about 3 more years. But I was mostly just make sure the technology was right, you know, testing out how can we actually pull this off. So he's definitely ambitious and kind of has like this kind of very kind of vivid kind of vision of what he wants to do. But I think it's almost like doing a lot of work behind the scenes, kind of a lot of kind of, you know, I think about a duck, you know, looking calm on the surface, like everything going on underneath. You know, it's like I think he does a lot of work beforehand to make it look effortless by the end. And I think when he comes to something like Roma, that's like almost his. He's just so confident, just so assured in his vision, and it's just I'm going to present this like black and white period piece in Spanish, all set in Mexico City around this kind of time of, you know, unrest and revolution, but not really show you much of the action. It's just going to be all going to be in this mansion. It's going to follow this middle class family, and you'll only be aware of kind of what's going on kind of on the very periphery. You know, unless there's the odd point where it all kind of breaks through. You know, I think of the three, Del Toro is definitely the person, I suppose, the one you'd kind of identify most instantly, you know, compared to the other two. You know, it's like you see it and you said that's a Del Toro film, whereas Inarritu and Cuaron, I'll say you probably need to take a bit more time, kind of get into their headspace, into their world to kind of make that judgment.
I mean, there's also the point that kind of, in the nicest way, Del Toro has worked on the others.
Yeah.
Like, Del Toro, I'm just checking Wiki now. The longest gap between any two films of his is 5 years, which is between Hellboy 2 and Pacific Rim.
And that was because of The Hobbit. That's because he lived in New Zealand 2 years.
Yeah. Whereas somebody like Cuaron has done 8 films. The first one was 91, something like that. Yeah. You know,
91,
like Potter was his 5th film. He then did Children of Men in 2006, Gravity, and Roma. Like, it's like 7-8 years between them, pretty much. Yeah. So, I mean, Del Toro, in a way, has kind of had more chance to actually give himself a specific kind of mark. That's not to say that, you know, he wouldn't have had one by film 6 or 7, but, you know, if you keep working, then there's more chance to develop a style and a flair because you're doing it more, gaining the practice.
And Del Toro's movies, too. Like, you know, maybe Harry Potter is the biggest film any of them have ever done, but people have seen more of Del Toro's movies, just in general. But both because of what you were talking about, Kieran, and, you know, they're good.
Yeah. And on big film franchises, Del Toro, yes, he was in things for The Hobbit, but he was also initially contacted to try and do The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And turned it down because he wanted to make another movie with a fawn in, and that was Pan's Labyrinth. You know, I find it actually hilarious that therefore he's turned down C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, who were best mates. So,
but before we, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would say Del Toro of the three has possibly had the most meteoric rise, you know, of kind of the career, you know, like going from like really struggling to get his first film made, you know, Kronos, you know, just looking in the, you know, in my book here, you know, it's like it took 10 years building the makeup and special effects, and basically the production just kept stopping and stalling. He kept running out of money, and he kept kind of losing investments. And it's like he got Ron Perlman. You know, I mean, Ron Perlman wasn't the biggest star in the early 90s, but he was getting there. You know, he was a name by then. And he kind of they met and hit it off. And Ron Perlman, his agents basically says, right, they're not going to pay you now, but you will get paid. They need to finish the film. It's kind of have a bit of faith, basically. I mean, from struggling so much, to get. I mean, luckily, I think along the way he hit it off with James Cameron. He showed James Cameron his sketchbooks and all his ideas, and Cameron's really impressed. I mean, I'm not sure specifically whether he actually got it over the line, whether he gave him a bit of an investment, or whether just a bit of kind of good word of mouth. But I think he inspired him. I mean, there's stuff here like saying it's like Del Toro was like staying in like really rundown hotels, and like there are days where basically he could afford to either shower or eat. and on the day when he met James Cameron, he was really dishevelled and just desperate looking, and James Cameron just took him out for like a slap at lunch and just said, "Have whatever you like," and he just piled his plate high with food and drank a lot of wine and just kind of got a bit of a boost from that. But
can't blame the dude.
But from that, and to like Shape of Water, winning Best Picture, a monster movie winning Best Picture,
it's not even a monster movie. Well, it is, but let's call it out for what it is. It's Creature from the Black Lagoon fan fiction.
Yeah,
it's
somehow
a monster romance.
Yeah,
it's fanfic. I'm sorry.
Again, another one of his favourite films is the original French La Belle et la Bête. It's and that's basically a take on that. Like a modern take on that. I say modern, it's Cold War set, but it's. So he's I think he's always been well regarded by critics, but he's been embraced more and more by audiences over the years. But he's kind of had like a slight uneasy kind of relationship with Hollywood over the years, even though that's his bread and butter now. After Kronos, he went off to do his first Hollywood film. He did Mimic, which was a disaster because the studio didn't give him the freedom he needed, and they kept cutting in and re-editing stuff and released this butchered cut that was nothing like his original vision. So.
And it's interesting that he works in genre so much more than the other two. Obviously, they work in some genre, but
I mean, I don't think you're ever going to see like just a straight drama, made by Del Toro.
The nearest you'll get from that is Nightmare Alley.
Yeah, but even that's very, very noirish, very macabre, very kind of.
It's a psychological thriller.
Yeah.
It's film noir, sort of.
Yeah. But
not falling for it, not falling.
So Mimic didn't quite work out, but then after that, he did back to back, did Blade 2 and Hellboy. Kind of stepped into like this kind of superhero kind of adjacent kind of basically the comic book adaptations, aren't they? And he brought kind of his own kind of unique kind of take and style to those.
Everything's kind of orange and green.
Those are
his famous colours. That's his colour palette.
And if you could throw in a clockwork mechanism or something that looks quite insectoid, he's going to do it.
Yep, that kind of how it works. Even you watch any of some Devil's Backbone where you've got kind of the green and orange, the kind of the water kind of basement area. Obviously, Pan's Labyrinth is very green and orange. Shape of Water, green. That's his colour palette. Yeah. Certain directors have certain looks, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of time. I know it wasn't particularly well regarded, and a lot of people issued that. I've got a lot of time for Crimson Peak. I really enjoy Crimson Peak.
Crimson Peak is underappreciated. And I think it's one of those ones where sort of 20, 30 years, people are going to watch it again and go, actually, this was good. I think the reason it was just, I think the wrong film at the wrong time for the audience that didn't want it.
Yeah, is it just like big stars in kind of a mold you're not really used to? So you have like Mia Wasikowska, you have Alice, and you have Jessica Chastain, and you have Tom Hiddleston not playing Loki, which I think is what probably what a lot of Hiddleston fans were going and expecting, and he's playing this horrible bitch.
It's Bluebeard.
Yeah.
It is just Bluebeard in a gothic mansion.
And again, obviously, his style. I mean, Del Toro. He didn't. He had to build the mansion for real. Full size. Like detail everywhere, and his kind of take on like ghosts. Again, ghosts. They're not. yes, they're kind of the imagery is striking and kind of horrific, but they're not really to be feared. They're to be understood. That they want to communicate something to you.
And that's kind of the theme that goes through songs, even in Devil's Backbone, which is a ghost movie, and it's all about ghosts.
It's the closest thing it's done to a straight horror film, I'd say. The Devil's Backbone.
but even Devil's Backbone is it's a Spanish Civil War drama that happens to have a ghost in it. It's not a ghost movie.
Yeah, he said something about Crimson Peak. He doesn't consider that a ghost movie. He considers that a gothic romance with ghosts in it.
Yeah, and that's kind of, again, Del Toro's thing going all the way through. The monsters aren't the bad guys most of the time. They're going to be a once and twice Pacific Rim. It's
normally monsters that, if they're not kind of synthetic from the off, then they're red herrings to start with, but then you realise it's usually fascists, isn't it? It's usually the fascists are the real enemies.
And that's something interesting between that and Pan's Labyrinth is they both take place in that setting. And, I was wondering if either of you had any insight into why Mexican filmmakers working in the Spanish Civil War setting, other than, maybe it's a critique of fascism or something from Mexico or the US, but
I think if you're coming from a culture with a lot of trauma in its past, I think it's a way to kind of process that and to kind of manage it. And obviously, Mexico, obviously has, fair bit of, fairly dark past. I mean, even going back as recently as to Mama Tambien, I think it's meant to be set a few years before. It's meant to be set in the late 90s, but even then they were coming out of years of one kind of government kind of in power, quite right wing, and the references to it, to incompetent presidents and to protesters being violently kind of repressed and stuff like that. A bit like I've mentioned, in previous episodes, how Bong Joon-ho, processes, Korea's kind of dark past. I think it's just genre trappings and kind of fictionalization of kind of real events. There are a way of processing what actually happened and what they may not have gone through themselves, but certainly their families would have gone through it. I think Del Toro, his parents were political dissidents and they were on the run for a long time, so he's got memories of.
His dad got kidnapped in '97.
Yeah,
he had to pay a ransom fee for it, and I think James Cameron kind of was astonished by this. Yeah, because they're both very, very outspoken, and because was his dad a journalist? I think. Possibly.
A writer, definitely.
James. Checking on Wiki. Del Toro's father, Federico del Toro Torres, kidnapped. Del Toro's family had to pay twice the amount originally asked for. Apparently, afterwards, James Cameron offered to help Del Toro pay for the negotiator. His dad spent 72 days kidnapped. The culprits were never apprehended, and the money was never recovered. And apparently, kind of it influenced, affected his father every day. It goes, every day, every week, something happens that reminds me I am in involuntary exile from my country. There's. It's not just this. I think in Devil's Backbone, doing some research specifically for it, that's the one I watched today. There's something I never heard of. Was something that happened in Spain during the Spanish War, called something like the Stolen Children of Spain, where during the Civil War, the war that had two sides, kind of one very much a kind of Catholic kind of side, and one kind of was the liberal kind of freedom fighters. I can't remember which side it was. But there's essentially the one in power kind of stole children of kind of leaders and political parties on the side. And there's 300, they estimate about 300,000 children were taken from their parents and grew up in other places. And because after this, Spain's had essentially a policy of do not speak about it and essentially forget this ever happened. Even fairly recently, in the past 10, 15 years, there are still people that were taken there who have no idea who their parents were.
Yeah, I mean, it's a plot point very plot point in Almodovar's Parallel Mothers. You know, they're literally, it's ostensibly it's just a story about two women who give birth on the same day in the same kind of maternity ward, but it spirals into basically that they end up. One of them's kind of got is in a relationship with an archaeologist, and he's unearthing all these mass graves, basically, left over from the Civil War. All the victims of Franco's fascists. And it left such kind of deep scars on kind of that country, and even Mexico, obviously different country, Spain, but that Spanish kind of cultural kind of connection, that kind of history there is. They couldn't escape that.
And I think in Devil's Backbone, the idea of it says the idea of a ghost is something which has yet to happen, something which is yet to go away. It's almost like, and there's the image of the bomb which is yet to go off, and all this kind of, I think, ties into this idea of something which is yet to be resolved. Much like kind of obviously it's set around an orphanage. In the Civil War, it's about children. You can't get linked that are any closer to finding a way to deal with this trauma. And I think in a lot of ways, this is what Del Toro does. He takes these subjects and deals them through these fantastical elements and brings these elements into it. And you were saying before about him not getting the recognition. I think one of the reasons for this is because he works almost primarily in kind of horror and fantastical genres, which, let's be honest, are not very well regarded in the kind of cultural sphere of awards, at least in terms of the US. We'll give them the cinematography and sound editing and things like that. But in terms of like the main big ones, no. Which I think was the shock when Shape of Water got nominated for everything. One half of it, everyone's like, we love it, but what? Shape of Water? Really? This is where it comes out?
I know. But I mean, even his dumbest film are quite some way, Pacific Rim, which doesn't have a lot going on below the surface. It's a living anime, basically, isn't it? But
he's literally said, "Look, this is just my most it's just me having fun.
This is just action figures being smashed together, basically, isn't it?" But
it is fun.
But even that is so much fun, and it's so much kind of more kind of lovingly designed and kind of brought to life than most of like the similar kind of genre stuff. It's just, you can tell like the person who made it like loves what he's doing, and just having it's like a cleanser for him after the misery that he had on The Hobbit. That obviously his vision never got off the ground. It's
although he's still credited in some of it.
He still have a writing credit, I think. So
he does.
Yeah.
Well, and sorry to jump back to the generational trauma bit, but or country, whatever it is.
Yes, The Hobbit is generational trauma. Sorry,
the movies are. In Inarritu's Bardo, there's a scene where the writer, he's talking to an American diplomat, and they walk out into a courtyard of a castle, and he's like, so this is where the Niños Heroes during the Mexican-American War, they fought to the bitter end here against the American forces, and we get to see the battle playing out in front of them. And while he isn't dealing with their colonial connection, he is dealing with their connection with the U.S. in that sense. And does Del Toro have any movies where he deals with U.S.-Mexican relations in sort of like a Trumpian or anti-immigrant right-wing way?
Not so far, no. But he has been critical of like American kind of government kind of institutions and stuff. That's in Shape of Water. It's in Hellboy to an extent. It's. I think, like Spielberg, he's got a general distrust of authorities, I think.
And Roma,
I think even Crimson Peak of the whole capitalism aspect, and and very much dealt with fascism, which it depends which way you're going to see the
the entrenched upper classes, they're definitely got a few screws loose, haven't they? And they,
again, considering his upbringing of not being able to eat half the time, it's going to be an influence.
And Roma also, I forgot about this. It has the indigenous housekeeper for the family, and that's I guess a way for Cuaron to deal with the more Mexican colonial aspect, where a lot of the Mexican indigenous people were killed.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is a certain amount of guilt there, isn't there? I think he is addressing in that film. You know, I think he's acknowledging. Yeah, we probably didn't. Looking back, this wasn't okay. You know. You know, she's very sympathetically portrayed, and I don't think many of the family come across as, well, kind of a bit patronising, I suppose, and a bit uncaring and take it for granted. But yeah, I think he's sort of acknowledging that, and to have you know, a major release, have you know, a sizable portion of dialogue in, you know, that in that native dialect, you know, the I can't remember what the language is called. But, you know,
it's either Mixtec or Nahua. It's one of those.
Yeah.
I took a Mesoamerican art class, so I probably need to rewatch his movie.
I was going to say, you've got more clue than the rest of us.
Yeah, I need to look for like the iconography and stuff like that, because those, like the Aztec ruins and the Teotihuacan, like there's all kinds of cool art stuff down there, and I'm sure there are filmmakers that have tapped into that I need to check out too.
Yes, this is how badly informed we are. You know, when we do a podcast, we know nothing about our subject. Yay! We try our best.
Hey, we know about these three, which is our subject. So,
and
maybe,
you know what?
Maybe in a few months' time we can go away, watch a few more Mexican films, read a bit more, and come back and, you know, do a redo.
Well, it did
a general trend every 6 months. You do Mexico Part 2, Part 3, Part 4.
Yeah.
Did either of you come across critiques about their work in the United States? Because I did read in one article, there was a Mexican critic who said, "Why isn't Inarritu working in Mexico? You know, why is he leaving us and going off to America?" Did either of you come across that?
No, I hadn't picked up on that. Only Cuaron's own thoughts about Utamama Tambien, that thinking this is probably the last film I'm going to do in my native country for the foreseeable future, so I better make it something I'm passionate about, and, you know, kind of that represents my country and kind of its art really well, you know. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they will go back. I mean, it's obviously Del Toro is slightly different because he's got a reason for not actually doing it, you know, making his films in Mexico, you know. But it's interesting. He's, of the three of them, he goes back further. He goes back to Spain. You know, that's where he kind of sets his you know, his films, not in English, well, you know, his Spanish language films. It'd be nice if one or all three of them, you know, did work in the Mexican film industry again, or, you know, did a film prominently set there and about Mexico. That'd be interesting.
I mean, if there's a season 2 of Cabinet of Curiosities, maybe Del Toro will adapt a Mexican short story or something like that. But
yeah,
I mean,
I know there's a fair few Mexican you know, horror directors out there, so yeah, I'm sure he'd get one of them on board and be fully involved in that.
And I mean, also, you know, they all incorporate, you know, people from the Latin American film industry and in the writing and the acting. Now, we all at the beginning kind of talked about our experience with international cinema in school and its, you know, European focus. In those classes, we learned about national cinemas, you know, the Italian neorealism, the French New Wave, French Impressionism. So, based on their movies, I mean, do you think that they represent any kind of Mexican national cinema? Or do you think that idea with these three directors is maybe not something you can apply due to their transnationality?
Yeah, I think the lines are too blurred with them, really. And they've obviously all produced some fantastic work, but it's almost interesting because of its kind of transitional nature. You know, these guys, you know, they do have a different take, I would say, even if they're working in, like, you know, in the US or in Europe, you know, they do have a different take on these kind of these systems, you know, and the stories they're trying to tell, that it's a unique voice. But yeah, there are similarities there, but yeah, so there's kind of too different from each other. You know, they all came up similar roots to an extent, and they've have similar successes. But they're all such unique voices in their own right. I don't think you can lump them together really, even though we have done for this podcast, and some critics have. But basically, they lumped together as the three Amigos because there were three Mexican guys about the same age breaking through into Hollywood about the same time, and they're quite friendly with each other.
Kieran, what do you think?
I have my thoughts on kind of national cinemas and stuff like that. I think you can sometimes have like general trends at certain points in that are, in certain regions just because of the closeness, or maybe there was something cultural at the time. So you do get things like German expressionism because it's a group of people at that time. But, that is German expressionism is not something that still goes on now. It is, and it's a bit like Sam was saying with the J horror last week. That started, but then also kind of Korea did one or two films like it. Thailand did, Taiwan did, China, Malaysia, Laos. It's not just a single nation behind any of this. And I mean, I don't know enough of Mexican cinema to know, what all the history of it. But I can't see, aside from kind of obviously Spain going into English films, and then occasionally some kind of trying to work out generational trauma or national trauma at various points. There's not that much of a link between the two directors, and even that kind of link, well, there are 1,000 other directors in various parts of the world that are making films at the same time that will also in some way deal with national trauma, maybe through kind of fantastical themes. I've seen one a few years ago, I think it was from Morocco, Avatar. I can't even remember the name of it, but a lot of it was a kind of monster film that used that was very much against the background of these French kind of mansion ruins. So it's about the colonialism there. There's going to be Irish films that deal very much with English kind of colonialism and stuff like that. So like saying that even that is something which links it and makes it some kind of distinctly Mexican cinema at this point in time is completely bunk, because these themes are going to be transnational to start with. Can you link these? You could perhaps link a group of specific films together, but saying this kind of embodies an entire movement purely Mexico, and therefore in 50 years' time this will be inherently Mexican in style or something like that, is completely ridiculous. And, there's so much influence from elsewhere, even like people like Kurosawa in the 50s was getting inspired by Hollywood, and then Hollywood got inspired by Kurosawa. Everything is just a cultural mishmash of getting influenced by any other people. So there may be kind of very small movements, which I think is becoming less and less as time goes on. Maybe of 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 or 4 kind of very small zeitgeists. But I think that will kind of ebb and flow more and more, and it'll literally just be bubbles. I don't think you can define like an entire kind of a nation by cinema and identify trends like that will be kind of eternal purely because where it is or something like that. That concept, I think, is ridiculous.
And for me, I think the way I would look at it is they are representing, Mexico on the international film stage. So, with Del Toro, from his films that I've seen, I don't know if I would say there's anything distinctly Mexican about the identity of them, mainly because they don't take place there. There aren't, as far as I remember, many Mexican characters in them, whereas...
I think his like early shorts may have done, but there's things like...
Kronos is set in Mexico. But, but that's it. Really.
And to be honest, I think that might also be for budgetary reasons as well.
Yes.
And things like one of his shorts that I've seen, I definitely seen Geometria, I think it is, which is very low budget. As far like he got a couple of actors together and himself with a camera kind of thing, and it's about him trying to raise a demon, a kid like 13, 14, trying to raise a demon in his house. to help him with a maths test. But unfortunately, because he's not good at maths, he's got the symbols wrong, and he's done it wrong, and it's the wrong design or whatever. But even that, the lighting is so ridiculously blue and red Suspiria. Even he said it's Suspiria. Like that was the main influence. I just wanted to use the lighting for whatever reason. So even from then, he's being influenced by cultures abroad and things like that. Yeah. So even right back then, even if it is set in Mexico, like there's influences from elsewhere. So it's not a distinct kind of national identity from that.
Yeah, and I don't want to do a disservice to him. Obviously, he is Mexican. There are things in his films that will be influenced from his life. But with Cuaron and Inarritu, I do see a bit more negotiation on Mexican identity, stories that involve Mexicans, how they interact with, the U.S. and some cultural things within a couple of his films. So, I see it a bit more in their movies. But yeah, I mean, there's no specific stylistic trend. You can't point to either of them and say, "Oh yes, this is the Mexican new way." No, they're just making movies that are pretty similar to what is being put out through Hollywood. And I think in particular when you think of the Birdman and The Revenant, which are his two biggest films for Inarritu, they are distinctly not Mexican. So and it's both in style and content and all of that. So there are films that can only be of a certain culture, but at the same, and that was like one of my undergrad essays I did on Shutter, was the idea of the 2004 film that we did years ago on Second Cut, that it is a film that pretty much due to the context of Bangkok and the development of Thailand and things like that, and the themes that go into it and the background of Thailand, it can only really be, the specifics of that film can only really be Thai. It would not, you'd have to change certain cultural things in other places. But at the same time, you would not look at it and go, stylistically, this is a Thai film. Yes, it is in some ways, and it isn't, if that makes sense. It's not like some strand of identifiably Thai cinema. It's not something where if they moved the entire narrative to Bangkok, that is Thailand. Okay, you moved it. I'm losing my mind. If you moved it to Beijing, you wouldn't look at it and go, "This is still an example of Thai cinema." It's just cinema that is where the storyline necessitates it being Thai. Well, and let's don't get too deep into this, but I mean, I think you could make Rome open city somewhere else, but I don't know if you would. So
but my point is, if Rome kind of the plot line and everything, it may be a Mexican film in that sense, from a story point of view, but from a filmmaking craft point of view, you wouldn't look at it and go, "Oh, stylistically, this is a Mexican film." That doesn't exist anymore, I don't think, in the same way that maybe a German expression is.
Whereas I think if we do return to the subject in future, and we've seen a few more Mexican films from over the decades, we may see more of a distinct style.
I was going to say, in 6 years' time, Jacob may be editing in a little disclaimer at the start of this, going, "Please disregard everything we've said here."
2 years later.
Well, we were wrong.
Yeah, I mean, for Roma, though, I would say there is the distinct architecture. The whole thing takes place in Mexico City. So maybe
that's more of a plot thing that makes that film.
But
the
it's
film
also
is
the
Mexican,
architecture and the people, and it's not just the story.
Yeah, the film is Mexican, but the filmmaking, I don't think you don't look at it and go, "Oh, this is a distinctly Mexican style of filmmaking."
Again, some ways now it's like, do you? I mean, this again is how awards bodies categorize films. It's like to do with the language they speak and where the money comes from, essentially. So
they edit with rolling R's.
Yeah.
I was going to say Britain has no kind of major franchises backed of its own. James Bond is American. Harry Potter is mostly American money. Like we don't own any major films anymore. It's all US money.
Doctor Who is going to be American before long.
Having worked on a movie made in Wales but distributed by Universal, I can tell you, but a lot of the money comes from, even if it's an Israeli Welsh film, some of the money comes from the US. Not even made for that much money, but Universal's distributing it. They have a lot of power, so yeah. Therefore, is that film Israeli? Is it Welsh? Is it American? You would not look at that film that I worked on, so I know, and go, yes, Welsh filmmaking. It doesn't happen.
Yep. All right. Well, do we have any final thoughts?
I do hope the three of them do, make some films in Mexico again at some point, and kind of bring because they bring the cultural perspective, to their films, where they're making them. But I think it would be interesting to see, kind of over decades, if their views have changed and their take on the country of their birth now.
Castle Frankenstein is set just outside Mexico City.
Yeah. I mean, he's still not. I would put money on it being a period film, his Frankenstein film, but it's not announced whether it's going to be, or it's going to be a faithful kind of adaptation, or it's going to be a bit of a twist on it. I mean, who knows? I mean,
stop motion.
But it is, I think it is a sign for aspiring Mexican filmmakers. These three, they can hold up these three and say, we could be them one day. And whether we just keep making films in the country of our birth and add to our national cinema, or whether we go on and go off to them glittering hills of Hollywood. It's,
and to be honest,
it's a sign that it can be done. That think anything's possible.
And now that they're there, and let's be honest, they have some money behind them now. These kind of filmmakers that do show promise in Mexico will have people that can help give them a leg up in some way.
Obviously, Del Toro in particular, the number of low-budget horrors he's supported as a producer over the years, and I'm sure he does support projects back in Mexico and in Spanish language. Yeah.
Even as I said before, getting Jennifer Kent to do the first thing she's done in years in Cabinet of Curiosities, which is glorious.
He's got some pulling power. He's got some pull, definitely.
And Sam, I like the point you made about people could see them and go, oh, I could do that. Especially in a country like Mexico, which it has the same sort of inequality issues that we have here, at least based on what Inarritu told me. I don't know that for a fact, but I keep seeing this commercial. Finally, our baseball season is over, but there's this commercial with women doing a bunch of different jobs, and the tagline for it is, if you see her, you could be her. And it's important for it to be visible that anybody can do anything. And that's why Bong Joon-ho winning was so important. That's why Oscar So White was such a big deal.
Representation matters, and being able to see yourself matters, for anyone really to make something of themselves, to be inspired to, push that bit further. Yeah, and we're three white Anglosphere dudes. We're going to talk about a lot of movies from white Anglosphere dudes because we like, or French or whatever. It's inevitable because there's so many and we like so many of them. But I don't want to toot our own horn, but it's important for us to talk about other stuff too.
Yeah, as I was going to say, and also I don't know if you find the same thing as well, but when you're really tired and it's about 9 o'clock and you want to watch a film in the nice way, you don't want to sit down for this 2.5 hours and read the subtitles the entire time. Sometimes you just want something on in the background, and having it be in your language helps. Yeah, your language. It doesn't matter if you nod off, because you'll still have a general. If you half sleep, you'll still generally hear the dialogue, whereas if you don't speak the language fluently, as soon as your eyes close, you're screwed. You can't even be on your phone during a foreign language film. You miss. How awful! I mean, it's tough to do. Admittedly, that is one of the good reasons of going to cinemas. Turn off your phone. And sometimes that's why I will go. So I watch something without checking the phone. Because I don't check it. I know everyone else does. And they screenshot it as it's going on. I've seen it previously. But, anyway. I have no final thoughts on the three amigos other than I wish them the best, and come on, Del Toro, get your Lovecraft adaptation going. That isn't Lovecraft in Cabinet of Curiosities, because the Mountain of Madness is too too good and expansive to not be made by Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
All right. Well, once again, Greg, thank you for being here. I see that you agree with Sam on Twin Peaks. I guess all of us. You agree
on
with
Twin
all
Peaks?
Of us on Sorry, Crimson Peak.
Crimson Peak.
He probably agrees on Twin Peaks as well.
I sure hope so. Maybe we'll find out. And if you want to support us like Greg, guys, where can people follow you online?
You can find me at SSP Thinks Film and at the Film Magazine. Probably by the time the next episode goes up, there'll be a couple of reviews of some exciting upcoming films that I'll be seeing at Leeds Film Festival in the coming days. So look for hopefully my thoughts on Poor Things with Emma Stone and Hirokazu Koreeda's new film Monster. So check those out in the coming days.
Hopefully you don't find me anywhere, but if you do, I am K Judgmental across the webs. On the Film Magazine, my Lugosi article went up. I'm not sure if it was up this time last week, but also I had my rankings of all the 11 Children of the Corn movies. Which I was just like, what the hell was that? And don't worry, by about number three or four, I was like, how many more of these do I have to go? And I kind of did it because I was like, there's a new one coming out, and then I saw how many there were. I've got to do this, haven't I?
He suffered so we don't have to, everyone.
Yes,
go read
like that. That is like some of them.
Horror
like I
movie
read
Jesus.
it, like Halloween, at least still fun. Some of those others, it's kind of like, aside from maybe the first two, it's what ranking of awful are they? So if you want to
I don't even like the original, so I can't imagine how like any of the others.
Like the original's good for Linda Hamilton, and then the two people that play Malachi and Isaac. And the guy who plays Malachi with his Courtney somebody, isn't it? With his like ginger hair and the sickle, like he's iconic. But yeah, it's not 100% great. But I often say you don't have to. But if you want to find out my ranking of absolute schlock over the years, that they keep the fact they keep trying to do it is amazing. I thought they'd given up by now, but no, it has been fairly consistent every couple of years. There's a new one. So if you want to see my pain and torture that I bled for you, then go ahead. That one.
And you can follow me at Jacob Film Guy. I don't know if I've written anything. I can't remember. Maybe not. Wherever it is.
You've been too busy watching baseball, I think.
I have been watching a lot.
You did your Scorsese De Niro collaboration piece, didn't you?
Yes, but it is not out yet because Sam. So Sam and Joe collaborated on how to format it, and they did spring, summer, fall, and winter. So you pick 4 movies from each different era in their lives. And I said, well, forget that. I'm just going to write about 4 movies. And I thought that was just Sam's way of doing it. Turns out that's official. And so I have to rework. I have to take out New York, and add in The Irishman. So
I'm so sorry.
Thanks a lot, Sam.
Oh, and by the way, because we were talking about her earlier, Maribel Verdú, who you pointed out, who was in Tu Maman and in Pan's Labyrinth, also was in a film that Jacob would know very well. She was in Tetro, the Francis Ford Coppola movie.
Tetro is good.
And so, there's Jacob being a little bit happy because his fanboy mode suddenly activated.
If I can find a way for us to talk about Tetro on this. Oh, that's exciting.
I refuse to. Like, I have watched it. I remember almost nothing about it. And that's probably it.
I've never even heard of it, never mind seen it.
It has...
Is this his last one?
It has young Han Solo in it. So...
Okay.
I don't think it was his latest. It may have. Oh, maybe it was. He made 3 in the late 2000s to early 2010s.
To be honest, I forgot he was making stuff in the 2000s.
Yeah, he made 3 movies, and that's the best of them easily. So
maybe we will discuss it when he eventually brings out Megalopolis.
Yeah,
that'll never happen.
So, go read my stuff or just go watch Tetro, whatever. And
Megalopolis will never happen, but you know what will happen? People will buy the merch and they'll support us. And where can they do that, Jamie?
They can do that at our red bubble down in the description. You can also just give us money.
I'm wearing one of our t-shirts today.
I've been drinking from our water bottle the entire time. Yeah,
and I have something too, but it's just not over here by me. So yeah, you can support us there. Give us money if you don't support having physical possessions, and follow us at Second Cut Pod everywhere that we're that, or Second Cut Podcast, or Second Cut anything else. And then Greg says I'll watch Birdman first before Tetro, so probably a good call. Birdman's better.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's it. Thank you for listening / watching, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Adios.